Hello and welcome to Masters of Divinity. I am your moderator, JP, and I'm here with Father Chuck.
Aloha.
How are you, Father Chuck?
Yeah, I'm doing. I honestly extremely tired.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, because
Kid stuff?
we are. Yes, sort of. We're moving. We are. We have been in a temporary house, and we are now moving into the permanent church housing here in Hawaii.
Okay.
It's like less than a mile away. The move, as a local one recently put it, it's just far enough to be a pain in the butt.
Okay.
But we had to be out yesterday. It was our last day. So, you get to the end of a move and it's like you've moved all the furniture, you moved all the big boxes, and now you just have like the knickknacks that you have to pack up, and it just seems to take forever. And then you have to clean the place. Mm-hmm. So we were we were doing all of that. I went over, did some sweeping and some things last night after the kids went to bed. And then Kana left to go back and do some other cleaning. We decided to take shifts so that someone was always in the house. Well, I was like dead asleep when Cora woke up. And she's going through a growth spurt. And so she was starving. And so I had to like text Kana. It was like 1 a.m. And to be like, hey, I need you to come back because, Cora's screaming. And so like being in Hawaii, everyone's windows are open. Mm-hmm. So like the whole neighborhood is hearing this child screaming incessantly. And I'm like, people think I'm like neglecting my child. Like I'm like worried that like they're going to like, do like some kind of wellness check on us. Because this baby is
Shouldn't
screaming.
people know by now? Babies scream. They scream. They scream all the way up until 2. I've got one right now that's screaming. You probably heard him.
Well, and then to add to it, right? I go into her room. She's laying in her bed, and I'm kind of rocking her, and like, let's just calm down, baby, go to sleep. And then it doesn't help. So I'm like, okay, well, I'll bring her into my bed with me, and hopefully, like, I can kind of like calm her down in the bed. Oh no, because then she smells Kana, and now she's like mad that Kana's not around. And on top of that, she hates pacifiers. She hates like every now and then she'll suck on a finger as like a soothing mechanism, and I tried that, and no, that just pissed her off. So not only is she crying, she was mad crying. Have you heard baby mad cry?
Oh yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So mad crying as I'm waiting. I mean, it took Kana probably like 10 minutes to get home, but it felt like 7 hours.
She may not be old enough, but I wonder if it would still work. You gotta try the Matt method. Justin Bieber's baby.
No.
You gotta try it once.
No.
Try it once. I've tried it on other children and it's worked.
I have managed to go this far in my life without ever hearing that song.
Chuck, do you want to get sleep or not?
I normally get sleep. This was just one time that it didn't happen.
Okay. All right. Well, I think you should try it. Because it works. It's miraculous. It's miraculous. You won't believe your ears or your eyes. I mean, you're going to be singing it for days, but...
Like I said, I've managed to go this long of my life without ever actually hearing that song.
Now, the Matt method is that Matt discovered that when Bella would cry when they were trying to put her to sleep or take a nap or something, they couldn't get her to sleep, but like one day he just started playing Baby by Justin Bieber, and that did it. And as long as that song was on, she would sleep. And then my cousin's little boy, Nathan, when he was, before he could walk, same thing. Couldn't get him to go to sleep, couldn't get him to nap. And I was like, try Baby by Justin Bieber. I was joking. Like, I just tried it, and it worked. It worked.
That is crazy.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think if it works on Cora, that's 3 times. That's like, that's enough. I think to prove that there's something to it.
Getting back to our earlier conversation about empiricism, I think I sort of have like a scientific obligation to try it, right?
Yeah.
On top of that, I mean, getting ahead of ourselves a little bit, but I'm in the cassock.
I have noticed you're in your cassock
today.
Yeah.
Partly because I mean, obviously in my office doing my churchy stuff, but also given our subject matter, I don't know if I've ever told you. Mm-hmm. So. In Boca Raton, there is the Murakami Japanese Museum and Gardens.
Right, yeah.
Right. So
I never got to visit it.
Oh, you never got to visit it?
No.
Oh, man, that's sad. We were members.
Yeah, I remember. Yeah.
Oh. Well, so across from the Murakami Japanese Gardens and Museum is a Starbucks. I had gone to visit a parishioner who was in the hospital, and as I was coming back that way, I wanted to grab coffee, so I swung through the Starbucks. So I walk into the Starbucks in my cassock. I come walking in, and there are anime fans in the Starbucks.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And I get asked, "Oh, who are you cosplaying as?" And they started listing characters that I'd never heard of in my life. And I just said, "Oh no, I'm just a priest."
That's great. That's pretty funny.
I'm wearing this because it's basically an anime costume, apparently.
Yeah. Sure. I'm sure there's someone you can conjure up.
And it turned out that there was some kind of it was the springtime, like, I feel weird. I want to say anime, but I know like that's the smug way of saying it.
I mean, just say it. That's fine. Like,
Kana makes fun of me when I say anime instead of anime.
That's fine. I had friends who made fun of me because I would say Pakistan instead of Pakistan. And I'm like, that's how people say it. Ding dong.
Yeah. So
you're not American sounding enough.
A big springtime like anime festival happening at the Murakami while I was getting the coffee across the street, and so they thought that I was like cosplaying for that event, which I found very, very humorous.
Yeah. That's great. That's a good little introduction into what we're talking about today. And today is a sort of prologue, a primer into our brand new series called are we going to call it Modaku or Modaku or Modaku?
I would say Modaku.
Modaku. Yeah, sure. Okay. It's not a real word anyway, but so I guess it doesn't really matter. But Modaku, portmanteau of Masters of Divinity, mod, and otaku, which is, Japanese for like a nerd, basically.
Yeah, right? Geek,
nerd, fan. We've been wanting to do this for a while. Like, I think we came up with this about a year ago, actually, because Evangelion was about to come to Netflix.
That's right.
And we're like, oh, we gotta get those clicks. So we're unleashing it. We're seeing how well they can do. But also, it's just kind of an area you've talked about it, of course, because you are the resident weeb.
Apparently.
And you've talked a little bit about anime every now and then, whatever. But we've never talked about it as a subject, as a sort of a topic. It's an area we have not explored. We've explored so many areas of fandom and Christianity. Anime, kind of new territory for us.
And we can also use the opportunity to talk about the fact that there is a legitimate Christian anime.
Right, was it the one where the Bible stories were? Superbook. I don't know that I ever watched that. I don't think I did. I don't have memories of it, at least.
I watched it a few times in like Sunday school, and like when we had a substitute teacher and they would wheel in the cart, the video cart. And I always enjoyed it because it was sort of like those Hanna-Barbera Bible stories, where, like, the kids like travel back in time and they somehow like witness the Bible stories taking place.
Yeah, that I saw plenty of. Yes.
Yeah. So it's a similar premise in that, but the Superbook is like a robot Bible, because of course.
So this was like a series, not like an anthology.
No.
So it's like there's actually like a narrative. Here. Okay, interesting.
And it's like these kids are dealing with some kind of real world issue, if I remember correctly, and then the Superbook tells them that there's sort of like a Bible analog to that, and then the Superbook zaps them into the book, which is more like an e-reader type thing.
Okay.
And it's like a robot, because again, it's anime, so of course it's a robot, and sends them into like Bible times. And so and I remember like being fascinated by the animation as a kid, and then I later learned out that it was legitimately Japan produced anime.
Okay.
So it's like, and I realized that I loved it years before I even knew what anime was. So like that's kind of, I don't know, just kind of it's an intersection here for us, JP.
Yeah, so you would say that was your introduction to anime then?
I mean, unintentionally.
Yeah.
My legitimate introduction to anime was without a doubt Speed Racer on Cartoon Network.
Okay. Was that part of a Toonami?
I think it was before they did Toonami because it was on like Sunday nights.
Right. Okay. My introduction, sort of the way you were introduced through Superbook, was like back when I was a small child and still watching Nick Jr. when I was sick from school, and they would show there was like a Grimm's Fairy Tales anthology show.
Okay.
That was done in the style of anime. So like countless Disney stories, but done in anime style. There's that, right. And also a show about koala.
Oh, right! I forgot about that.
A girl with these stuffed koalas, where she touched their nose with her nose. Yes! They came to life.
I remember that show.
Yeah.
Oh, I loved that.
What was it called? I don't remember. But I loved that show when I was a kid because I was a stuffed animal baby. Like I loved stuffed animals, especially if they were Disney characters and stuff. Are you looking it up?
I'm looking it up.
Was it the
Noozles?
Noozles, the Noozles. That reminds me of the. There it is. Oh my gosh! Yes, that's it. That's it.
Yeah.
She had like a compact or something that like was like a tricorder. I don't know.
Yeah.
Like
Blinky
a magic tricorder. Yeah, that's it.
They're from the extra dimensional realm of Koala Walla Land.
Yeah, then they and they were. Yeah, and they like eucalyptus was like.
Yes.
Crack like. Yeah. So that was sort of the unintentional introduction. My cousin is an enormous anime fan, and he got into it when I was around I think I was 10 years old, and he really wanted me to get into it. And I think there's maybe one summer where he just sort of bombarded me with the essentials. Right, showed me Akira, which is a great movie. I think that movie actually, out of all the things that he showed me, that's the only one that kind of stuck with me. And I can still watch and enjoy today. He showed me Vampire Hunter D, which was pretty cool. Wasn't super into it, but it was cool. He showed me. Oh, what were the other ones? Let's see. Ghost in the Huh?
I was gonna say Ninja Scrolls.
No, I don't think he showed me that. He showed me Ghost in the Shell.
Of course.
Which I didn't really like that one either. And he showed the Street Fighter 2 anime.
Yes.
That I loved. I thought that was super cool. Actually, every now and then I'll pull up a fight scene from that one because it was pretty cool. It's got a cool soundtrack too.
Yeah.
Way cooler than live action Street Fighter. Obviously.
Yeah.
And also tried to show me Dragon Ball Z. Not into it. Could not get into it at all. Never became my thing. I'm sorry. I know there are just diehard Dragon Ball Z fans out there. Not my thing. Didn't get into it. And then there was Ranma 1/2, which was really bizarre.
Oh right.
About if I remember, wasn't it like a dude who could become a girl or become a panda? Something about a panda. I don't remember.
But I'm aware of the characters. I've seen the characters.
And Project Echo, which I thought was pretty cool back then. Which is about a girl with superhuman powers, but she went to high school and stuff. It was funny,
yeah,
and also like comic booky.
Yeah, I sort of came to anime or became aware of it through very roundabout ways, right? Like I mentioned, these early kinds of shows that I saw, but and Speed Racer is probably the first anime that I was sort of aware that it was anime.
Oh yeah.
When I watched it, but growing up as a Nintendo kid, right? Like Mega Man was one of my favorite. But I do think some of my earliest memories of something that we would call anime came from advertisements for collectible shops. So one of the weird things about me, I think I've probably talked on the podcast before, is the way that some kids, went to toy stores and stuff. Like I obviously did too, but like I spent an inordinate amount of my time in my life in like secondhand stores and collectible shops because my mom's a doll collector, and so like I came to all of that through those experiences. And so like Sci-Fi World on International Drive in Orlando, and Enterprise 1701 on Lee Road, and Wizard World, which was, I can't remember where, like 1792. Anyway, these were like all of these collectible shops that I grew up in. And that's where, like when I was into Star Wars, like that's where I went to find Star Wars toys because they didn't make them for a while, if you remember. And so like you could only get them at like collectible shows and things. And as you're spending time in those places and like seeing advertisements for them on TV, I remember, I think it was Enterprise 1701 that had an had an advertisement where they talked about their vast selection of JAPANIMATION, which was, remember that was like the term for it for a while. And I can just remember seeing like clips because they were talking about like, their collection of what they had. And there was this one clip that always stuck out. It was for some movie where it features like, it was like a girl in a schoolgirl outfit or something, but she's like running up a stream of bombs that are being dropped down from some kind of airship, and she's like holding a sword or something. And I just remember that image, and I later saw, I can't remember what that movie was, but I remember seeing it on sci-fi channels like Japanimation block that was on for a while on Saturday mornings. But I just remember like seeing that and realizing that there was a distinct visual style to it that was very different than like The Lion King or other cartoons that I had grown up with. Probably closer to things like Thundercats or Silverhawks, which definitely drew from an anime well when they did those shows. But I and I was just sort of like given to like thinking that was cool. And so anytime that I didn't, and plus then like going to Blockbuster and stuff, you'd see the videos on the shelf, right? And they were always like parental warning videos. Like it was like, weird. They were cartoons, but like I remember spending years being fascinated by the Guyver. I wanted to be like, what is that? Like that's a cool costume. What is that movie? I want to see it, but like there's no way that, because it's got like the parent sticker on it, that my mom's ever gonna let me watch that.
Yeah.
So the same thing with Akira. I saw Akira on Sci-Fi Channel for the first time, and it was just like whenever I could catch it on TV, that's when I watched it.
That's cool. Yeah, I think it's I didn't quite have the same feeling when I was sort of introduced to it. When my cousin was sort of introducing them to me, I was just sort of like, I was enjoying them, but I wasn't becoming like fascinated with them. And I think it's because like I was already on sort of a steady diet of comic books, superhero comics, and it was always like, oh yeah, these are like the comic books I read. So it's like, and at the time, superhero movies really only consisted of like the 70s and 80s Superman and like Batman, and they weren't very comic booky, and so it was kind of cool seeing like that kind of action on screen, and I was enjoying that, had fun with that. But at the same time, it wasn't quite ringing my bell like I think my cousin was hoping, because it never really got into it after that.
Yeah, and I also, one of these collectible shops I went to, I remember they sold Gundam models, and that's when I first saw a Gundam model, and like I was so fascinated by the aesthetics of Japanese mecha. I had already been a Godzilla fan for a long time, so I was already, but like the anime part of it was like, this is, and I think I'd probably seen like an episode or two of Robotech at some point in my life. And so like I saw the connections like thematically between that, but like so like my interest in anime more came from like seeing like images or models on shelves that then I eventually started like, I want to learn more about that, but I didn't have the freedom to like just go like look it up or rent it. So like when Speed Racer first showed up on Cartoon Network, I was like, oh, that's anime, like that's awesome. And then they used to run Robotech after school on Toonami. Like Toonami was so cool when I was a kid, because I got to finally see all this stuff. Anyway, I realized we're just completely talking over Matt. He's just sitting here. He just chimes in, and we're just talking over him.
I was going to introduce him once you're done. Matt's here. Done. Hey, Matt.
I've been here the whole time. This is the first time they let me talk.
For the past 39 minutes. You were very
Yeah.
quiet during our discussion about Hegelian dialectics, which I thought was interesting.
Yeah, I probably would have been very quiet if I was actually here. That's okay. Hi.
Matt, we were just talking about like our first time we were all kind of like, exposed to anime and how it affected us and whether or not it stuck with us. It definitely affected Chuck, and it stuck with him. Didn't quite stick with me. Maybe one movie did, Akira. But the other stuff, my cousin tried to show me over a period of one summer. What's up?
I want to add. You said it stuck with me. I want to add that. Like, yes, I had a Gundam Wing wall scroll on my bedroom wall at one point, but I remember, like, I never became like the anime guy. Like, I remember once being at Best Buy looking at the anime section, and the employee coming over to me, and she had like leopard spotted hair, and she came over and she was like clearly into the fact that I was looking at anime and started to like quiz me on my anime knowledge. And I was like, I've seen like 2 of these, man, so I want the viewers to understand, like, I know it, but I don't want somebody like messaging and being like, oh, have you checked out blah, blah. Like, I'm not that into anime.
Well, I think you might be more than us though. Like I
Probably.
not an anime guy, Chuck, but you do like anime.
Yeah.
I feel like you kind of want to be. I feel like. Oh, we'll get to that. I want to move on to Matt.
I feel like he just walked away to find evidence that's going to prove that what he just said is a load of nonsense. Like he's 100% an anime guy. Whatever he comes back with is just going to be.
Yeah, because
yep,
I'm a little surprised that I thought he would, be like, oh yeah,
he
totally.
undersold it and just is like, I mean, I like it, but I'm not an anime guy.
Yeah, I mean it. I don't know.
I had this whole plan because I thought I had like a box of Gundam models here in my office.
I told you.
So I was just gonna be like, I'm not an anime guy. I was just gonna start like pulling them up and like sitting them aside. But I did find I've got like a little Gundam guy here.
There he is.
Yeah.
There we go.
So
Great.
the joke didn't really work.
Matt.
But, yeah.
Matt, how did you?
Yeah. I'm still here, still waiting to say anything.
How were you first exposed to anime?
I need you to do math for me.
Okay.
If my dad was born, I answered my own question. Never mind. 55. So his 40th birthday would have been 95, right? 95?
Sure.
If my dad was born in 55, he would have been 40 and 95, correct?
Yeah, sounds about right.
No. Somebody check and take this out of the recording before I say
don't
it
make me
on
do
the
math on
actual
my
recording.
show, man.
He's a film guy, and we're divinity students, Matt. We got into our respective worlds because we hate math.
40. Guys, 1955 plus 40 is 1995. I answered my own question. Don't worry about it. So in 95, I was born in 84, so I was 11. There's a reason for all this. I was 11 years old. Because I was born in 84, so in 95. I was 11 years old when I first experienced anime, to answer your question.
Okay.
And I don't remember what channel it was. I don't remember exactly when it was. I just remember that it was around my dad's 40th birthday party, and I was watching TV in their room because they had a bunch of people over, obviously. And I turned on some show, and I wish I knew the title of it, but it's anime and it's vampires.
Is it Vampire Hunter D?
That's what I originally was wondering, but I don't know because I don't remember any Vampire Hunter in it. I just remember the vampire himself, and I remember him getting like staked to the wall or something and exploding in like an insane amount of blood.
It sounds like a Vampire Hunter D thing.
And I'm like, what the heck kind of cartoon is this? So that's how I was the first time I discovered anime as far as anime goes. Like before that it was the books, I'm drawing a blank.
Manga?
Yeah.
Manga.
Yeah. Like I used to think those were kind of cool. When I'd like wander through Barnes and Noble just because they're backwards, because we're America and everything's about us, so they're backwards, not ours. and I thought the art was interesting, but then that movie, which kind of scarred me for life for a while about anime. Excuse me. And I'm glad to say that I grew up to discover I'm still scarred by anime, but we can get into that, I'm sure, in future episodes. I have a lot to blame you two for. But what I am discovering is that I have lived my entire life interested in and drawn to American culture that blatantly rips off or attempts to recreate Japanese entertainment. For example, Guyver. I didn't know Guyver was an anime movie until long after I had seen a certain movie with Mark Hamill that was made here in America, and
it's awful.
Loved it when I was a kid, and watched the sequel, and my in-laws are pulling into the driveway while I'm talking. But saw the movie, saw the sequel, and then discovered long after that it was an anime. Mm-hmm. It wasn't hard to know that like Power Rangers was ripped off from Japanese culture because it's like their show.
Well, yeah, Sentai.
We just put Americans in the live action scenes that they're not in a costume.
Yeah, so obvious.
But my point is, like, and I know that's not anime, but my point is I never realized how much I was into Japanese entertainment and never knew it because I was watching all the knockoffs, even the horror movies, JP. Some of my favorite horror movies growing up, The Ring, The Grudge. Mm-hmm. Find out later, oh, these are remakes of Japanese horror movies. So I've been a Japanese film and anime adjacent fan my entire life and didn't know until I was an adult where this all came from. And yet still can't say I'm an anime fan because I'm scarred for life from that first thing I saw and from you guys. So don't worry about it. Horrible.
But you did watch. I remember in college I was starting to watch because Adult Swim used to show like pretty cool anime shows late at night. I was starting to kind of get into Cowboy Bebop, which I still think is kind of cool. But you were watching Witch Hunter Robin, right?
Oh yeah. I loved Witch Hunter Robin. That's the one obscure one that I was a huge fan of. Loved Witch Hunter Robin and love it for all the reasons I'm sure other people didn't. It was super boring. And I was totally into this like 100% drama cartoon. Like it wasn't driven by action and it was like watching a dramatic procedural that was drawn. And they just happened to hunt witches and then it would have like magic battle at the end. Nice. But I just and I'm sure we'll get into it into future episodes, so I won't go too deep, but I liked Witch Hunter Robin. I liked Full Metal Alchemist. I've watched that whole show. I've even watched the live action Netflix movie.
Of which one?
Full Metal Alchemist.
There's a live action version? I didn't even know that.
Yeah, there's a live action movie. And there is, hold on, pause break. Hello. Good, recording a podcast.
Matt was spotted by a fan.
They're in my ear right now talking away. Nice to meet you. Thank you. See you later.
I just want to, just a quick aside for a second, I just want to remind all of our viewers and listeners, if you see us out in the public, please don't approach us. Like, it's really, we appreciate you listening and stuff, but we kind of try to keep a wall,
Yeah, I mean that's why the masks have been a blessing, right? They don't know it's us.
Yeah.
All right.
Someone just walked up to Matt's car and like insisted that they talk to him. Like, I mean, like I said, we appreciate everything you guys do for us, but if we're recording, just kind of be cool. Like, please be cool.
Fans, what can I say? So I like these few anime shows I got into. What I like about Japanese anime and I like about the storylines is like the depth at which these things go. They're not like a surface level entertainment thing. But I've also noticed that that's even even in their like geared toward younger audiences stuff, they're still not afraid to go into topics that we tend to shy away from.
Yeah.
They're kind of like, it's kind of like Mr. Rogers' philosophy. Like, kids are going to deal with this stuff too. So like, you know, all their cartoons from like the kid level all the way up to the obviously rated R and beyond adult stuff deals with like loss and grief and fighting within families and fighting within friendships and relationships, and like it's all in all their stuff from like Pokemon all the way up to whatever the worst anime you can think of is, which is probably Neon Genesis. But I'm just kidding. I just had to get Chuck's reaction. You can't see it on the recording, but on the video you'll see. That's all it was for, Chuck. I know. I'm sorry, but yeah, I like they're not afraid to dive into it instead of shy away from it. Because I mean, you even watch things like I said, like a Pokemon or like the Airbender one. Like these things.
Japanese. Avatar.
Yeah, I know, but that's a bad example. Great. Just anyway, I just like I like that they go there. Is my point. Like,
Okay. Yeah.
I was going to say that raises an interesting question that we could probably talk about at some point, which is, does anime have to be Japanese? Because like he just mentioned Last Airbender and like Korra, like those are two shows that are definitely like in the wheelhouse of anime, at least in the animation style and all that.
Well,
Plus, there's also the Boondocks, which is a
yeah.
I think that the reason I made the mistake is I think anime has become. I mean, it obviously is specifically Japanese anime is the real thing, but I also think it's become like the blatant term for that style.
Yeah.
So like it's easy to confuse because if you draw a cartoon in that style, it's what people are going to think it is because it's very specific form. It's like Egyptian hieroglyphics. If I draw a picture, somebody's going to see it and go, "Oh, hey, look, that's like an Egyptian hieroglyphic." And it's like, no, some pathetic white dude in America drew it, but it's
like an anime style. Yeah. Yeah.
That's what I said. Thank you. I would also like, speaking of anime style, I would also like to point out that Father Chuck, who is not an anime guy, as he put it, was drawn to a life calling by God that he wears an outfit that looks like he stepped out of an anime cartoon.
We were just talking.
Can I just draw attention to that right now, Mister?
Yeah.
You look like
why don't you
the uniform that every person wears, and like every soldier in a Japanese anime, the general is like wearing your outfit right now. It's just a different color.
Right.
Well, what that's funny, Matt, is before you came on, I was sharing that I'm wearing my cassock today, partly because one time I was getting Starbucks across from the Murakami Center in Boca. And it happened to be that same day was some kind of anime festival. And so when I walked in to get my coffee, all these like anime fans were asking me who I was cosplaying as. And they were just like, throwing names at me. Like, I'd never seen that.
That's an interesting question. Did cosplay come from anime? Like, is that where it sort of gained its popularity? I mean, I know you can cosplay as like anything, but like,
I think it's probably a combination of things, right? Because it's definitely an otaku culture thing in Japan to dress up.
Right.
But I think there's also the nascent thing from Star Trek conventions of people dressing up as Star Trek characters.
Yeah,
that comes out of the Star Trek convention world.
But I do have to say that the term cosplay I'd never heard of until
it's definitely a Japanese
conventions became much more like the internet caused all of us to know what these conventions are. And the term cosplay I'd never heard until it was people dressed as Japanese anime. Now cosplay is any costume you put on your cosplay.
Yeah, I would say. Definitely cosplay is definitely a Japanese.
Definitely like a lot of Sailor Moons and stuff.
Yeah, I probably should have looked more into this before I started the episode because I feel like cosplaying is like, you know, there's definitely a culture, you know, like Trekkies dressing up as their favorite characters in conventions and stuff. Star Wars fans dressing up as Star Wars characters and waiting in line to see the movie. You know, that's its own little sort of, you know, a little thing that fandoms share. I feel like cosplay is a bit more like turning that into sort of like an art in a way.
Oh, totally.
Like it's something that can kind of occupy an area of your life, like not just building it, but also like wearing it. You know, like the point is to kind of bring attention to it.
Yeah.
So I think there is a certain distinct quality about it than just like dressing up as your favorite character. And I think it's interesting. I should have looked into it more because I didn't even think to think about cosplay when talking about anime. But that's become so intertwined these days now, right?
Right.
Anime. Is there any anime that you're watching now that you guys are enjoying? And Chuck, I would assume there's some stuff that you watch currently.
Actually, not really. I
thought you were watching One Punch Man and stuff. Like,
I was watching One Punch Man for a while, which is hilarious. Kana and I really enjoyed a show called Usagi Drop, which was this really very touching little domestic series about a 30-year-old guy adopting a 6-year-old girl. Mm-hmm. So it's this great little story about parenting and parenthood. I of course watched Neon Genesis Evangelion. I still have yet to watch End of Evangelion though.
Yeah, I don't think either of you have.
I have to put myself in a headspace for that.
Or
watched what?
You've watched it, right, Matt? You've watched the end.
I watched the whole stinking show, and I watched 2 stinking movies, which one stinking movie just made me relive the whole stinking show again.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the other one was...
I've seen the whole thing.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right, just making sure.
We have issues.
Yeah, I still got to see End. I still got to see End of Evangelion.
No, you don't.
No, I do. I actually do.
No, you don't.
Matt had a traumatic experience, apparently.
Mm-hmm. It is a traumatic experience. That is the very definition of that movie.
But I will say that with my kids love Miyazaki films.
Of course. That's something I want to talk about for a minute. I have an aside about Miyazaki. I have a bone to pick. But go ahead.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, at this point, I've probably seen My Neighbor Totoro more than any other movie. I mean, the kids love that. And they also really like Ponyo. And
that's the fish, right?
It's a strange movie. It's got Liam Neeson's in it. And we also watched we've also watched only one time we watched Spirited Away, which is a bit of a masterpiece, but it's kind of scared Charlie a little bit. And so we haven't checked it out again, but I do want to watch it again. And I really want to see Kiki's Delivery Service. I've not seen that yet. That's like the one Miyazaki film I've actually really, really wanted to see.
And it's the only Miyazaki film I've seen.
Okay. Totoro is fantastic.
Yeah.
It really is fantastic. I'm not going to get into it too much, but what did you want to say about Miyazaki, JP?
Well, I want to ask Matt first. Matt, have you ever seen a Miyazaki film? Do you have any idea who we're talking about?
I do. I don't.
You
know
don't?
From experience. Well, I was trying to finish my thought. Shut your mouth. I do know who he is. I don't have any experience of his movies other than knowing the titles, like Kiki's Delivery Service. Can I ask a question? Because I don't know who he is. Does he have anything to do with that, like, Flying Castle one, too, that I always hear about?
Yeah, Howl's Flying Castle.
Yeah, so see, I know all about his stuff, but I've never seen it, and I don't know him. Because how you say it, the fish guy?
Ponyo?
Definitely heard of that one, and, like, isn't
Totoro.
Kiki's Delivery Service, is that, like, she flies around on a broom or something?
Yeah.
Yeah, see, I'm familiar, but I haven't actually seen them.
Yeah. We did an episode on where we talked sort of in depth about Miyazaki with one of Chuck's former students.
Yeah, with Maylin O'Malley.
Yeah. And, you know what's funny is I have a bone to pick with Miyazaki. Now, I need to reassure everybody, the masses. I am mostly tongue-in-cheek when I say this. I mean, I hate to be the guy to like explain their bits, but I feel like I have to in this case because I don't want to get shot. But there's like a viral video of him where, not too clear on the context, but these two animators were presenting some footage to him that they had made, where like I think they had used AI to create like a zombie.
Oh, I know.
Yeah,
I know context.
Okay, all right.
They are programmers with Konami, and they are working on a Silent Hill video game, and they were trying to show off to Miyazaki what they had accomplished.
Right. First of all, that was your first mistake. I don't see how Miyazaki would be interested in anything related to Silent Hill, judging by his work. And when he shows them this zombie that's just sort of like, rolling around, because, it has no like limbs. The amount of like parental disappointment in his words and his voice and his face. I mean, they showed him this zombie and he was like, "You have insulted me. You have here is a sword. You need to fall on it." And like the look on their faces is like, dear leader is disappointed. And whenever I see that clip, it's usually posted in Reddit or Twitter. That's usually where I see it, right? That's where I spend most of my life anyway. The threads are always like these peasants dare to show Miyazaki their stupid zombie animation. But my takeaway was, okay, so not a Romero fan, probably. I don't know. I don't like the shaming of it. Like, it's just a zombie, man. Come on. Like, it's a horror thing. It's you could have just said, not my thing. Sorry. But like he brought up this whole thing about how he has like a paraplegic friend and it reminds me of him and it's so inhumane. Basically just kind of like softly berating them. And I was like, come on, guys. Like, lighten up.
But you've also got to remember, JP, people who share that are not appreciating the fact that this is coming from a Japanese cultural context where, like, shame is part of how they do things. And so, like, to apply Western values to it misses something kind of crucial there. Like, it's something that goes without saying for them. Like, it would not come across there the same way that it would necessarily come across here to have like, it wouldn't be like you showing Spielberg something you made and then Spielberg saying that to you. Like, that's a very different thing based off of our cultural context versus like a Japanese context.
So you're saying it's like kind of perfectly normal to be like, I think Miyazaki would like my Texas Chainsaw Massacre remake. Like,
he probably would. He probably wouldn't.
I mean, but I don't know. I mean, I understand the cultural differences. I understand that there is a shame and honor. I don't know. Is that problematic now? Because the shame and honor culture thing is such an evangelical thing. It's ingrained in my head. I don't know if it's like an actual term used or if it's problematic. I don't know. Is it?
I don't know.
Can I say Japanese culture is a shame and honor culture? I don't know.
I think so. I mean, like the cultural guide they gave me when I came here to Hawaii talks about it that way. So, because Hawaii is also a shame and honor culture. So
okay, well, I still think it's dumb. For most part, I don't know if I would show my zombie to the guy who makes movies about dragons who like grant wishes or whatever. I mean, maybe if the zombie grants wishes, I don't know.
It would be seriously though, like it'd be seriously showing like a sequence from Saw
to Walt Disney.
Well, I was trying to think of someone
or like Mr. Rogers.
Yeah, well, I was thinking of somebody more, but yeah. I mean, yeah, it's close. It's close.
Yeah. Which is, I understand the hustle. Like, that's the entertainment industry, that hustle. You got to find anybody who's connected and show them whatever you got, right? But like, then like you just look at their faces, like they're just so like, oh, I've been shamed by Miyazaki. I don't know. It just never sat right with me. I'm like, it's just a zombie, man. Like, just tell them it's not your thing and move on. But whatever. I guess that's the Westerner in me. I don't know. It's an American way of thinking. I don't know. But so like I do kind of have that, and I'm like, oh, give me a break. Like I do kind of feel like it's sort of lends itself to this sort of sort of deification of Miyazaki. I don't know if I'm being unfair. I was just expecting like at least one person to be like, "Come on, give it a rest, whatever." Anyway, whatever. Moving on. Miyazaki is cool. I've only watched one of his movies.
I'm sorry, I just realized I totally am the anime guy. I have a paid subscription to Crunchyroll.
All right, yeah, just maybe that's what this series is about. That's going to be your arc for this series, is to embrace that you are indeed purely otaku. What's the other word? The other Japanese word about like that describes like the shut-ins.
It's it'll come to me.
I watched a Vice documentary about those guys, and that was really sad.
Yeah, the ones who like marry their body pillows and stuff.
Yeah, and they like die alone.
Yeah.
I mean, they had one of the reporters show up to like a crime scene, like, I mean, crime scene. He had committed suicide, and he had turned out to be the victim had turned out to be one of those. What's the word? No, I don't know. Moving on, we won't get into the depressing part.
I'll read real quick. Let me redeem Ghibli for you a little bit.
Okay.
They sent. You mentioned about falling on your sword. They sent a sword to Harvey Weinstein, basically with that intention.
That rules. That rules. Okay.
Because
right.
You know about that, right? Like like there was a distribution deal with Weinstein. Like
I probably heard of that. Probably through Disney.
There was something that he was trying to do. I can't remember the details of it now, but it had to do with distribution. Anyway, he threatened them that if they didn't do X, Y, or Z, that he would basically like not distribute their films in enough theaters. And they didn't cave. And so like some Ghibli film only went to like a few select theaters or whatever. And so in retaliation or in response, they sent him a sword.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Well, that does kind of redeem it a little bit.
And you just know that he was like, "Oh, look at this cool sword."
It's like the perfect size for disemboweling yourself. I don't know.
Seppuku blade. Let's get Matt talking about Neon Genesis Evangelion.
I don't want him to spoil it for you though, Chuck.
That's
true.
The thing. That's true. Okay.
But I do want to know. I've actually
spoil.
We're at certain different paths
Depression, in the end.
Chuck has seen the series, but he hasn't watched the movies. Matt has watched the series.
More depression.
Matt has watched the entire thing. I've only seen the movies and the recap. The movie and the
Continued depression.
So I haven't watched the series.
Total hopelessness. I just summed it all up for you. You can move on now. You're done.
I don't think it ends on a hopelessness note. I wouldn't say that.
Excuse me?
No. I mean, it's. I don't want to spoil it for. Like I said, I don't want to spoil it for Chuck.
Total hopelessness.
I will say that's a show. I experienced something rare with that show that I've never.
It is a show. You can say that.
Where, after watching episodes, like I could only take like 2 or 3 at a time, and then I had to take long.
Binged it all in one day.
Oh,
you binged the whole thing in one day? Oh my gosh! No wonder
and both movies.
Matt.
Oh, no wonder.
Matt traumatized himself.
It was not okay.
You need to watch Shin Godzilla because that same guy who made Evangelion made Shin Godzilla, but he's like made it like now that he's not depressed anymore.
It was a dark day.
I'll say, dude. Like I haven't watched the series. I watched the 2 movies, and like I remember my cousin showed me the movie, and I was like 19 years old, and he showed it to me before I went on like a road trip by myself across the country. I remember watching it and just being like, wow, this is pretty trippy. This is pretty insane. This is pretty cool, though. And then the next day, I'm just like alone with my thoughts in this car. I'm like, what did I watch? Like, what in the world did I watch? Like, it's kind of like watching 2001: A Space Odyssey for the first time. Like,
yeah, I watched the show while Kana was like out of town visiting like a friend or something with the kids. So I was completely alone.
Yeah.
And
we're all completely alone. That's the joy of that show. Just alone.
Can I say the thing that blew
total hopelessness.
Can I say the thing about that show that blew my mind, and I still think about it? Is there's a scene where the one angel like possesses his brain, Shinji's brain, and so you got this part where he's on a train,
Freaking out,
and he's talking. He's always freaking out, but he's on the and he's leaving. I love what. By the way, the recap is hilarious. You realize how many times that kid runs away? Like they ran out of ideas. He just keeps running away. Anyway, he's on this train and he's talking to sort of like a shadow version of himself, and the angel version of himself says that there's a piece of you that lives in the minds of everyone around you, and you're basically trying to control that version of yourself. The version of yourself that lives in the brains of all the people around you.
That's too deep for the show. I'm the Urkelbot that's become self-aware all of a sudden.
I need out.
Oh.
Total hopelessness.
This is why anime is awesome, because where else would you have that?
The Matrix, that's it. Maybe Cloud Atlas.
Depression.
Okay, so the Wachowskis,
yeah,
who watch a lot of anime, and
they
like disseminate it to us in like their weird blockbuster format.
Pretty much.
But seriously, like, there's like no other.
So if there's anybody out there who's not an anime person, can I just let you know? Because I feel like this is necessary to say. When we're talking about this depressing, dark movie that will leave you scarred forever, don't watch it in a day. And you hear Chuck say things like the word angel. Don't be confused. This has nothing to do with anything you think an angel is.
They're like Revelation angels. It's Kabbalah.
They're like body horror cartoon figures. Like I don't even know how else to like. It's not cool, man.
Okay, so it really drives home the
Eve thing. I don't know.
Well, it really drives home the idea that our idea of like our conception of angels that comes out of the Bible is actually borrowed from Babylonian religion.
Does it draw attention to that? That's what I got from it.
That's what I loved as an Old Testament scholar, like doing all that work. Like it was kind of cool to see that, like, this is Kabbalah, Babylonian type stuff, like the way that angels were conceived in that. Because I watched it around the time that I was doing some study into like Babylonian culture and its impact on Judaism, and like it all came through. Like, what's his name? Him or the guy who's the director?
I forgot his name. I'm forgetting everything. JP, I'm sorry.
JP, you said Ava, or what'd you say?
Well, you said Eve, I said Ava, but you were probably talking about Lilith.
I was talking
Lilith.
Yeah, Lilith.
Yeah.
Yeah, I said Eve. Did they talk about Eve in it too, though? I feel like they did, didn't they?
I don't remember.
Wasn't there an Eve and an Adam involved in this thing too?
Isn't Ayanami Eve?
I don't remember.
Anyway.
I mean, the whole. I mean, obviously, I think it's in the title for obvious reasons other than just the title and all that crap. I mean, it touches a lot on the Genesis concept. Like the book of the Bible, Genesis concept, obviously. But no, people, not angels. There's no people flying around in robes with wings.
Hadake Anno?
Yeah, that's it. Hadake Anno.
Disturbing living things that try and kill people, and some have been like hollowed out and turned into robot armor.
I really want to do an episode on Neon Genesis Evangelion. I don't know how to, though, because it's a TV show and a movie.
Here's how you
and a reboot. Like there's the new rebuild of Evangelion.
Let me tell you, here's how you do an episode on it. 2.5 hours of a black screen and no audio. That is how you do a podcast on that show.
No. What you do is you repeat the same lines over and over again, but each of us say it in turn, right?
And it's just that anime whimpering sound, like.
JP has never seen the show. It's like
they actually do that in the show, and it's not cool.
Which is what now?
You literally start wanting to dig your eyes out, and at one point. It's not cool. It's kind of like trying to make it through the Beatles song number 9.
It kind of is. Yeah.
Which,
Hold
by the
on.
way, messed up. The one time I listened to that in the car.
So listen, though, JP, the last like 3 episodes of the show,
Or a
Anno,
nightmare.
Anno had like given up, like literally in life, just given up. And so like entire sections of the show are like incomplete animation, and just like sketches, and, like single lines and stuff.
And like incoherent story, it's just depression on screen. Is
Yeah.
all it is.
There's
And
like a
like
whole
disconnected lines of dialogue that have nothing to do with the last one spoken, just to totally be like, life sucks and means nothing. So here
you
go.
can see why he got death threats then, right? When he finished the show.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. I can
Yeah,
see
but
that.
it does feature a lot of one line being repeated by
One
every
line being repeated.
voice actor on the show.
That's crazy.
One line being
I love it.
repeated.
Yeah, I think you
line
it's very
being
avant-garde.
repeated.
Very avant-garde.
Line being repeated.
Well, I think what's funny about it is that like it's not like some obscure
It's not
show. It's like the
funny.
most popular show in Japan when they're doing that. So like
There's nothing funny about it.
it's like if they did that on
Sorry.
Star Wars. Like if
Correcting
Rise of
my words,
Skywalker,
it's like-
where like J.J. Abrams was like, I give up, and they just released like
Storyboards.
scenes footage, like storyboards, and like
It probably
J.J. Abrams
have
would
been
be
better.
dead. He would be dead. He would be dead in the street.
It would probably be better than what we got.
Probably. I would take it.
I
So,
kind of want to
listen.
see the like reverse of.
I want to
Yeah,
see
Genesis.
J.J. Abrams
I wanna
go
see
like
his.
totally insane, release at
Yeah,
the
it'd
end of
probably be what
Evangelion
we
version of
wanted
Star
after
Wars.
The Last Jedi.
He was like, no, the last Star Wars movie is going to be called The Last Star Wars, or The End of Star Wars, and it's
The Last Star War.
The End of Star
One
Wars.
Star War.
So switching gears.
Okay, yeah.
I don't know what your plans are for this episode, but I do sort of I kind of feel like we should address sort of the anime stereotype.
Okay. So okay, all right. This is where things are going to get.
You know what I'm talking about.
Are we talking about? Are we going to get into tentacles?
I've got like
Well, you
2
went there.
minutes, so I might have to be gone before this anyway.
Are we talking about anime stereotypes or like fan stereotypes or
All of it.
Okay, there's this one time I was living in LA, and the Academy of Motion Picture Arts and Sciences, who do the Oscars, they had an exhibit that was dedicated solely to anime, and it was pretty cool. I don't remember what I saw, but I was with my friends, and there's just like one lonely dude who was kind of like also there. It was pretty empty.
You just
And he
described
was-
anime fandom. Sorry, we should
Yeah.
cut that.
Well, and this little lonely dude was like kind of following us as we kind of went to each part of the exhibit.
I'm still
like,
waiting
we
to be
would,
surprised. But
Me or someone else would make a joke and we'd all laugh, and then he'd go,
Oh.
and then he would like, I would say something, and then he would like interject with his own joke. We're like, oh, like I don't know. We were making, I guess we were talking about Street Fighter, and he just goes Hadouken. I was like, oh, it's time to go.
and that's how you met Chuck. Aw.
Sonic.
Oh, that's good. So I mean, yeah. What is it? What is it about anime that may attract? I mean, we've talked. Oh my gosh, we could write volumes about how much we talk about fandom, but I feel like the anime nerd is so distinct.
Well, JP, you and I share an acquaintance that is an anime nerd.
Do we?
Yeah, don't you remember? He used to frequent the EB Games at the West Oaks Mall.
His name is Joey. Yes.
Yes, he to me is like the platonic ideal of the anime fan.
Uh-huh.
And I got to know him working at a video game store. He would trade in video games all the time, and he just pretty much would spend his entire life watching anime and playing video games. And Matt's interjecting here.
Okay. All right. Go for it.
Well, I'm going to let you two discuss your anime fan thing. But I mean, I'll say the stereotype. You already talked about it. I get it. The stereotype is like a different level of nerdy. But then there's also another stereotype that I'll let the two of you get into, where there's also the pervert. So So I'm just saying that for some reason that's the two, and I'm saying they're stereotypes. I'm not saying they're true. That's the two stereotypes you get, is like the loner, completely by himself, nerdy kid that's into something that we're all like, what is wrong with that? I don't get it. And then there's the like same basic makeup, but with a touch of, I'm also afraid to turn my back on you. Like,
I have my theories on this.
Yeah.
Well, you guys can go with your theories, and I look forward to listening to them.
Yeah, there is a capitalistic, individualistic American culture at work here, clashing with another culture that's creating something.
We should let Matt go.
Is probably dialectic in nature.
Mm-hmm. So I'm going to go on that note and let you two anime nerds discuss it, because I'm too cool for you both. Good journey, bye.
Bye.
See you, Matt.
So here's my theory.
Okay.
About the anime fan stereotype. Okay.
We're gonna crack it here, right here.
I think it's kind of two things.
Yeah.
All right. One, okay. First of all, the perviness aspect of anime.
Mm-hmm.
I think that exists because some of the first instances of like manga and anime to sort of really be embraced were pornographic in nature in the United States.
All right.
I mean, I think, we had, in the 70s, we obviously had like Speed Racer, and we had Gigantor, and we had Astro Boy. Gatchaman, which was here as like War of the Planets or whatever it was, that they used to, they aired it here. So we had a few things of Robotech. There were like a handful of anime things in the 70s and 80s that had made their way into American culture, but they were still kiddie, right? They were still kids shows. I think that a lot of manga largely got introduced into the West through Heavy Metal magazine, which with running installments of Lone Wolf and Cub. And that, I think, added an element of like, this is an adults only thing. And then the pornographic genre of anime, which is called hentai, started to like appear in sort of shady places. And I think they sort of kind of rolled out with like other stuff, right? And then on top of that, right, there's this differentiating factor. Americans had largely understood animation to be for children.
Yeah.
And so the idea, but in Japan for a long time, animation was, everyone watched. Like there was, animation was available to all age groups, had it, right? Manga was read by adults, kids, teenagers, everybody, right? Animation, anime had, there was like, family sitcom basic kind of things that were animated. There was, the idea, and there were adult movies that were animated. There were all of it, so Japan was very comfortable with that. Americans largely understood cartoons to be children's fodder. We'd long left animation being like an adult thing, or even, because like you think about like the early Warner Brothers cartoons were totally adult.
Oh
right?
Yeah, they were.
And so there was that. So in order for it to sort of get into the West, for someone to be interested in it, like like you're not going to get Americans are not likely to go out and pick up, a movie about like an animated movie about like a family moving out west or whatever, right? Like the thing that's going to draw them is some kind of like, it's like exploitation, right? Like it has that like titillating factor that grabs you, right? So it has to be.
Yeah, you have an industry mostly run by men.
Right.
And, you don't need, you just need an actress to read the lines. You don't need her to do anything. And, you have sort of power over this character to do whatever you want.
Right.
So.
And so I think that aspect of it is what got largely introduced into, like, the adult market. So, like, adult animation, had to be, like, adult, right? Again, it's, like, I think probably, related to, exploitation cinema. And so, you think about like Heavy Metal the movie. When Heavy Metal the movie came out, in order for it to sort of be taken, be seen by adults, it had to be like, like nudity and stuff had to be in, over the top violence and stuff had to be in it. And so I think that that's part of how. So because of that, anime has kind of long carried that taboo with it in Western American culture because of just how it first introduced. This is my theory. Now, somebody out there could correct me on this, but that's my theory.
Yeah.
The first anime to be big, like first adult anime movie to be big in the United States was Akira.
Right.
And it's extremely violent and extremely weird. And so that was a big part of it. And then I think that that's part of like where those associations come with anime being, somewhat perverted and somewhat like weird. I also think that on the other side of it, anime offers a worldview that is different from the Western suburban worldview, and that it attracts the same kind of people that like a generation or half a generation earlier were attracted to like Monty Python. Which, or like, because there's that whole, there's a whole nerd subset who, gravitated to things like Monty Python's Flying Circus, or they gravitated to like Kids in the Hall, just offbeat, non-typical kinds
it's
of...
the other stuff that was in the comic shop that wasn't comics.
Right.
Yeah.
And like as a kid who grew up, with as an only child of a single mom who spent a lot of summers while my mom was at work and just kind of and had cable TV at my disposal, right? Like I watched a lot of like Upright Citizens Brigade and Strange
Mystery Science Theater 3000.
Mystery Science Theater 3000. A lot of that kind of offbeat stuff. And so I think that like I was sort of geared toward the idea that like anime was going to gravitate toward me because like I was just already into like offbeat, not normal things. And so I think like a kid who doesn't fit into the mainstream, would be considered a nerd or a geek. But we only use those terms because they just can't sort of function in the status quo that we've sort of arbitrarily created of what you're supposed to be as a teenager or whatever.
Yeah, that's what it used to mean.
Yeah.
Now it just means, you like things. That's what a nerd means now, right?
Right. But it used to be, you didn't fit in. And so, like, you would, so there became sort of feedback loop, right? You didn't fit in. And so you were sort of encouraged to, you sort of tried to fit in wherever you could fit in. And, you might have found out that the kids who were playing Pokemon cards and watching anime were willing to, like, sort of hang out with you. And so you gravitated into that world. And so like, I think that, so you got two things, but then like, okay, you find out that kid is interested in anime. Maybe they're only interested in anime because it's just different and they've never seen anything like it. Right. So they start watching Sailor Moon on Toonami, or they start watching, whatever. But then whatever level of anime that's been into the popular culture is considered like pervy.
Yeah.
And so they use that back on the kid. Oh, you're into those kind of cartoons where the girls are all naked and, like, oh, you're into that. You're weird. Oh, you're into like tentacles and, and I think it creates this feedback loop. Whereas like now that junk is mainstream, right? Like we talked about the Boondocks. Boondocks is a super celebrated show, which is clearly derived from anime, clearly derived from, because that's the one area of anime that like we probably don't talk about is that a lot of black youth seem to gravitate toward anime. Mm-hmm. And it was never seen as like, oh, you're into that. Like it was, like I can tell you the number of like black kids I knew in my neighborhood growing up who were like really into Dragon Ball Z. And everybody was like, that's cool.
Yeah. And I experienced that too when I was in high school, when I was going to public high school before I went to private school where I met Matt. But, before I went there, I went to a very large, very diverse high school in Orlando. And my friend group were those outsiders you're talking about. They all loved anime. They loved D&D, right. Comic books, Star Trek, Star Wars. And it wasn't just a bunch of white kids. They were white kids. They were black and brown kids. And also Kung Fu. Big amongst the same demographic, Kung Fu films.
Yeah.
So I think it does, at least at the time, it was kind of brought in as like an offbeat thing, where like, you know, in the 90s that being offbeat was super cultivated.
Yeah.
But it stayed offbeat. It didn't become mainstream. Like there was like a known market, and it was down there where people were being super weird, you know, and you could go to that. And so that's why like there's like this, just the whiplash of the shift that from like down there to now, like it is the culture.
Right. Well, and I think
is super weird.
Well, I mean, you
for
think
us,
about,
you know.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I kind of want to talk about the fact that we owe this huge debt to the artists that were involved in mid 90s Nickelodeon cartoons and like the entire operation that is Cartoon Network. Yeah. Because I mean, I just recently learned that like animators that are involved in like Ren and Stimpy and Rocko's Modern Life and all that, they worked for Russ and Baskin. They worked for like these offbeat animation houses, and that, you know, they never got embraced in the mainstream Hollywood, but these guys, you know, they animated like the weird, you know, off-brand Lord of the Rings movies and stuff like that.
You mean Bass and Rankin, right?
Bass and Rankin, thank you. Yeah, Bass, yeah, Rankin and Bass, thank you. Sorry, but like these guys, like, you know, these were offbeat, nerdy animators who never got embraced by the mainstream, you know, when they were working for these animation houses, but they managed to sell these bizarre cartoons, you know, to people. And then you think about, I mean, it's obvious that the people who were involved in Cartoon Network really loved the world of animation and the art form of animation and the history of animation, and the fact that they were given opportunities to do things, but they were given limited budgets. Like, I mean, I could go on and on about how brilliant I think Space Ghost Coast to Coast is.
Yeah. Do you think the massive popularity surge, like overnight surge of popularity of The Simpsons, probably lent itself to anime kind of being snuck in during the 90s and sort of more adult-oriented animation? Because then, you know, since it became popular, then, you know, Mike Judge started doing his thing.
Right.
Beavis and Butthead.
Right.
So...
Yeah, and I mean, I would say that, and Mike Judge is probably a really good example because of someone like as weird as it is to say, he's probably closer to what anime is as an American animator than like Matt Groening or even like Matt and Trey, like Mattson and Trey Parker, because, you know, or Seth MacFarlane, because like they're not making he's not making slapstick, right? Yeah. Beavis and Butthead is really kind of a sad story about neglected kids, right? And King of the Hill is just a sitcom that happens to be animated.
Yeah.
And it fits a lot more with some of the more like typical anime stuff you find out there. And that leads me to the other stereotype of anime that I want to talk about, which is also just how people associate anime with just like nurse uniforms or like sailor uniforms and robots.
Right.
And
yeah.
Swords, which is like not a huge like that's not all there is.
Well, plus I mean, like the schoolgirl outfit is like that's from Japanese culture, because the schools they all wear uniforms, right? Like,
right.
Yeah.
They wear those sort of like sailor uniforms, right? Which is,
and of course the robot is like, it's like these are symbols of Japanese culture, essentially.
Yeah.
Of like the uniformity. And then the robot, of course, their technology. The sword, right. I don't really know. Maybe it's
the sword is deeply rooted in Japanese culture because of the samurai.
Oh, there you go, of course, yeah.
Yeah. And the Gundam, by the way, Gundam is designed to look like samurai.
Yeah. So it's kind of funny. Those what an average American would symbolize anime. They're actually mostly talking about Japanese culture. Or how how an American views Japanese culture,
right? But I mean, I think it's such an interesting thing to talk about, and an interesting thing in terms of like, you know, one, we've talked about like the fact that like, you know, you have these lonely nerds, you know. I mean, I guess I could count as that, right? Because I was, you know, spent so many of my summers alone in my house, right? Like I can tell you like the summer that I spent by myself in my house building Gundam models.
Right. Yeah.
You know, playing video games and then just waiting for Toonami to come on so I could catch up with what was going on in Robotech. Well, think about think about a kid with like boundless imagination,
Right.
who's stuck in a place like Norman, Oklahoma.
Yeah.
Could you imagine what it would be like when you see Appleseed for the first time, or like Pat Labor? It's like a cop show about Mecca. I mean, seriously, like what it would do for you in your imagination. And that's. But I will say, it could be a separate topic for us to talk about sometime in this podcast. Is the fact that like you said, nerd culture has become the culture, and nerds have basically become like the jocks. And now nerds are the bullies, which is the weirdest thing.
I know, and it's oh gosh, there's so much at work at it when you include the internet. And something I've always kind of wanted to come around to say is we've talked so much about toxic fandom, and I think I've come to the conclusion I've come about face to that idea of toxic fandom. I don't think toxic fandom exists. There's just fandoms, and then there's the internet, which makes everything bad.
Yeah.
Because I don't think our fight are not with toxic fans. It's like, no, it's like this is what the internet creates. Like you have the alienation, the anonymity, and it's like it's going to create that kind of toxicity. But that's a different episode.
Right.
But
well,
but there is something like I'm still fascinated by the idea of tying this into the anime nerd, the isolated anime nerd. Also kind of related to the isolated gamer, who might be the same person, Right. There is like I said, there's a capitalistic element involved here, where you have like American individualism, and also I don't know if Japanese individualism is a thing. I mean, is individualism like a big Japanese thing, like it is here? I know there's super capitalists there too, but
in general, East Asian cultures value conformity more than individualism. But I'm not sure how that actually plays out in Japan, because obviously there are individuals, and you see, but I think there's sort of a sense that you can get away with it when you're young, but when responsibility strikes, you need to.
Yeah, right. Well, and what I'm trying to point out is that one of the consequences of capitalism is when you take an individualistic culture, especially hyper individualistic as it is here in America, you're going to create alienation.
Right.
So it's like a perfect recipe. And that's why you have like that, the shut-ins in Japan who like have their own word, and probably the same thing that's happening here. And they've become the internet, because the internet has brought them together, unified them in a way, even though it's not like a real kind of unity, because they don't actually meet or know each other. And so it creates this weird amorphous, I don't know, like it's ugly and weird. Well, and I want to say I'm not just painting all anime fans with this brush. By the way, I'm talking about I'm talking about a certain subset of people.
Yeah, I mean, and that's the thing is, like, I've encountered these folks in my travels. Yeah. I've I worked in a video game store. I used to frequent. There was a video game import shop that was located in the Little Vietnam neighborhood of Orlando, and my friend Josh and I and his brother John, we used to go frequently, and that's where you could buy like Gundam models, and you could buy like video game soundtracks, and you could buy wall scrolls and anime, and custom cases for your PlayStation, which was awesome. We spent a lot of time in these stores, and you would bump into these folks, right? That you can spot them a mile away, like, this stereotypical anime person, like, right? Like, or like, but as I'm talking about it now, and like with, some years of perspective behind it, that person and that personality isn't isolated to anime or to video games or to, like, that person exists everywhere. But I think in general as a culture, we've had this tendency to like, we like to scapegoat, and we like to categorize, and again, in this capitalistic thing you're talking about, I think you're right. Like, we love, and I think we talked about this recently, right? We love to label everyone. And we label them, and then when we give them a label, it's now like, okay, now that you have this label, we can market a lifestyle to you according to your label. And, because it's like what we've done. It's like what we've done with like race, right? It's like we've said like we white people are like, okay, you're black. Now here's what we're going to tell you this means. It means that now we're going to give you a magazine and we're going to give you your own clothes and your own, like it becomes this whole thing of like, you have to be this right now within like black culture. Of course, that's been embraced and become its own thing. But it like all started with us like trying to give like a racial alternative to like what we were doing as white people.
I actually saw this one really funny tweet. It was from a black person on Twitter. It was, how in the world did Sprite become the black soda?
Yeah.
It just happened one day.
Yeah, white people were like, hey, let's do this. Yeah, it's we and so like, and we do it with everything, right? We've started, so now it's like nerds become an identity, right? So like, I know we're getting in danger of talking about identity politics, right? But like, this is what capitalism does. We like give you this label, and then here's an identity, and now in order for you to live into that identity, here's a bunch of stuff to buy.
Yeah, and that's the alienating part. You've become alienated. Right. You feel that alienation, that feel that loneliness by, taking part in the commercialism aspect and the consumerism.
Right.
So. Yeah,
and the thing is like for me, like I know that like I liked buying Gundam models because I loved the way they looked and they were fun to build, right? Yeah. It wasn't like I was like, oh, I need this to fulfill my identity, right? Like I just sort of gravitated to it because I thought it was cool, right? And a lot of people gravitate to it, it's cool, but there's always that insidious piece like you're talking about, right? Where it can be co-opted and marketed to and to say to you like, here you go. And now what I wonder, now it makes me wonder, like with a culture that does this, how like the pandemic has furthered this, right? Because now what is it like? Try to be away from people. Try to stay in your place. Try to,
Yeah, and there's a weird back and forth of like, use this time to better yourself and work on that thing you always want to work on. And another point, like, no, you don't have to do that. Like, right. This is a pandemic. Like, this is not like I mean, the fact that it's a pandemic is already taking a toll on you. Don't burden yourself with more things you have to do. That's already an idea with whatever.
Yeah, and I think that and this is the thing that I think is where it gets kind of scary a little bit, like with anime, is because the other piece we have to acknowledge is 4chan, which started as an anime fans forum and has of course devolved into being the cesspool of the internet, where a lot of those folks have then left and created their own thing, and then that thing got banned and then they created their own other thing, which we will not name.
There's an interesting mix that came with that, and it's that we're getting very far away from anime when I go into this, but I think it's really interesting to bring up on this episode, which is that as long as the internet has existed in America, or at least back when like Usenet things were a thing before it was the internet, white supremacists were super active in those spaces. If you like these like Usenet spaces, because they were able to use it to spread all their information, all their propaganda. It's like the moment like it's like sprang to life. It was like, oh, this is our tool. This is just for us spreading fascistic propaganda. Come on. And those sort of Usenet groups moved in to those forums like 4chan.
Right.
And it mixes and mingles with these isolated nerds.
Yeah, right, which is like classic gang recruitment tactics, right? You find the lonely person and then you just sort of you recruit them to your cause, your idea, whatever. Well, that's why like it's come to a bit of a stereotype on the internet that like if you have a Twitter avatar that's like an anime avatar, that you probably should just block that person, right? And that's an unfortunate stereotype. And that's I think part of what I think we want to talk about with this series, right? Is the not only is anime as an art form, but also as we talk about anime fans, like that those two things don't have to necessarily like be right. Like you can like anime and not like hold a tiki torch in Charlottesville, right? Like It's becoming an unfortunate stereotype, and I think that's why we're acknowledging and trying to be very careful by saying it's a stereotype. It's not necessarily real. So, like, if you're listening to this, because chances are the hashtag showed up and it may have piqued your curiosity. That's the thing. Like, I want any new listeners to be aware of is, like, our whole thing here isn't like to like trash anime fans.
No. I mean, that's the whole point of the series. It is to be like, this is a thing that we haven't applied our expertise to.
Right.
And we're going to do that now. We're going to do it with a full-on deep dive music mayhem style. That's how you know we're serious about it.
Yeah. Oh, and that. But I think we also, let's be honest, JP.
Yeah.
We're also a little bit nervous that, like, some of these 4chan types might get attracted to what we're doing, and we're a little worried about that, right?
A little bit. So you wanna choose the first title?
Well, it sounds like it's between you and me, but you want me to do it?
Yeah.
Okay. So I'm gonna cheat, JP.
Okay.
Even though I know your pick, and your pick is probably way more cheating than mine.
Yeah, it is.
I mean, I'll say, I'll tell you, it was not a tough. It wasn't as tough as like Music Mayhem was for me, but I will say I was between two things. One of the first one, which I didn't pick, but I kind of wanted to pick Usagi Drop. Mostly because it subverts almost everything that I think most people think of when they in America when they think of anime. Because it's just this lovely domestic story, right? It's about this guy who finds out that his grandpa had a girlfriend on the side, like after his grandma died, and then he fathered a child, and the girl has no family connections or whatever, and so this 30-year-old dude opts to adopt this 6-year-old girl, and he's just a single 30-year-old guy, and so it deals with all the like weird culture stuff in Japan around a single man adopting or having a child. And, and it's just a great show about parenthood. The only thing is it's only available on Crunchyroll, and you could watch the ad version of it, but honestly, the ad version is very annoying because the way it works. But it's just a great little domestic thing. And so I do encourage people to check it out because it's only like, it's like an 11 episode season. Like that's all there is. At least as of the last time I watched it. I don't know if they've done more. But what I am actually going to pick is Hayao Miyazaki's very beloved, much beloved, My Neighbor Totoro.
I'm assuming there probably aren't like any zombies in or anything. Like it's probably
no zombies. No. In fact, I'll just go ahead and say one of the things that I think fascinating about it is it has no antagonist. And I think it's really amazing to see an engaging film that doesn't have to devolve into good guys versus bad guys.
I know that there are like some strong ties between Studio Ghibli and Disney.
Yeah.
I think that is what Weinstein was doing, I think.
Yeah.
I'm curious. There has been a trend recently in Disney animated films, with at least in the past, maybe since Frozen, where they've kind of done away with having villains. Like the Disney villain isn't really a thing anymore.
Well, there's Hans.
You have antagonists,
right?
But there's no like clear like black and white villain. It's usually mostly about.
A great example of that.
Yeah, Moana. Yeah, that's right. I don't know. I can't remember any other ones.
I mean, I haven't seen Zootopia, so I can't really weigh in on that. But
I feel like that's...
Onward. Onward has really no villain in it,
yeah.
Right? Other than time.
Although that's a Pixar joint, right?
But it's Disney. But yeah.
I think even Pixar like not really like villains anymore. You have antagonists, you have obstacles, but not really like a. There's no Cruella de Vil.
Yeah.
There's no Maleficent.
Yeah. But I will say that so Totoro has become a movie that I've seen so many times with my children. I watched it with them just on a whim. I always want to see it. We bought it on Blu-ray and we watched it with my boys before Cora was born. And part of the reason why I watched it so many times with them is it was the first movie that was amazing to watch, that they would sit down and watch it from beginning to end and not talk. They were just completely and fully engaged the entire movie, and they still are when we watch it. Like, the movie's magic.
Wow.
For children. So that's My Neighbor Totoro.
Cool. I'm excited to check it out because I am definitely interested in just watching all of them now that they're available to me. So, go out and watch My Neighbor Totoro, which is available on HBO Max if you have it. And I'm sure other places. Drop a few bucks on Amazon. Come on.
Yeah.
Give it a shot.
Amazon needs your money.
Yeah. So, like News Mayhem, we'll reconvene next week, and we'll all talk about My Neighbor Totoro.
Yep.
It's going to be fun. Great. That's a great place to end it. Father Chuck, Kunu, thank you.
Mahalo. Ekomomai.
And I also want to...
Sorry. Emalamapono.
Uh-oh. All right. I also want to thank Occasional Matt. And I want to thank you, the listener and viewer, for listening and viewing us. Be sure to tune in next week. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and... What was that?
I would say, I just randomly, as we're closing out, I just thought of a really funny joke that we should try to explore, which is sometime you should secretly, you should start grabbing recordings of Matt. And then whenever we sign out and he's not here, you should just include him saying good journey or some kind of thing. So it's almost, I don't know, it's funny to me.
Probably, yeah. I've thought about that, doing like what they did with Chef.
Yeah.
Have a wonderful week. Good journey.
Good journey.